Hey Internet, this is going to be another Dark Souls 2 lore video, and today I'm going to talk about the nature of the curse and the throne and the ending cutscene. So one thing that we basically discover in Dark Souls 2 that we didn't really have any information about in the first game, and I think there's a good reason for that, is that the curse is not just on the individual level. It's not just the curse of the undead person, the individual curse. The land itself is cursed, or perhaps the world itself is cursed. Cursed with undeath, in a similar way that the player is. Striad tells you, no flame, however brilliant, does not one day splutter and fade. But then, from the ashes, the flame reignites, and a new kingdom is born, sporting a new face. It is all a curse, and it is your cursed flesh that will inherit the flame. So here Striad tells us that, well, we were all wondering at the end of the first Dark Souls, what happens? If we link the flame, we basically understand that it'll eventually go out anyway, and that we're just delaying the inevitable by sacrificing ourselves. And if we get on with it and extinguish the flame, then we go into an Age of Dark, but no one really knew exactly what that means. Well, according to Striad, and Shalcor as well, even after the flame goes out, it eventually reignites, and a new kingdom is born, sporting a new face. This is the cycle of the land itself being undead. Eternally, new kingdoms are born on the same spot, over and over and over and over. The flame eventually goes out and reignites, and so on and so forth. But Striad, rather darkly, interjects a little bit of his opinion. He calls it all a curse, and laughs. You could view it as just the natural cycle of the world. You don't necessarily have to take a dark viewpoint of it and call it a curse. Well, the Crestfallen Warrior takes a similarly nihilistic position and tells you, do you know much about souls? Even I'm not certain, but I'm told that the soul is the essence of life itself. Anything living, sentient or no, has one. What we call the curse is traceable to the soul. Do you see what that means? To be alive, to walk this earth. That's the real curse, right there. So, for the Crestfallen Warrior, just to be alive and to walk the earth, that's the real curse, right there. He takes such a nihilistic position that whether or not you have the curse of undeath or not, just being alive is a curse. Or perhaps he's alluding to the larger nature of the world itself having the curse of undeath, because he says to walk this earth, that's the real curse. But I don't think it's plausible that the Crestfallen Warrior would know that, so maybe that's just a hint from FromSoft, or maybe I'm just reading too much into it. He tells you that the curse is traceable to the soul, or rather, what we call the curse is traceable to the soul. And we know that the Emerald Warden tells you that King Vendrick, who made this great land what it once was, peered into the essence of the soul. Well, the ancient dragon who existed before time, the last ancient dragon from the Age of Ancients, before Gwyn killed most of them in the opening cutscene of Dark Souls 1, he tells you, the murk shifts and stirs, yet another stands before us. Then, so be it, for the curse of life is the curse of want, and so you peer into the fog in hope of answers. The most striking thing about this to me was, yet another stands before us. Is the ancient dragon perhaps alluding to how many monarchs in cycles past and kingdoms past have appeared before him? Is it always the path of the monarch to seek the ancient dragon? Because previous to the player character there was Vendrick, and before that there were many kingdoms and many cycles in between Lordran and Drangleic. So we don't know how many monarchs might have confronted the ancient dragon in the same way that you do. But that's what he seems to be alluding to. He also tells you that the curse of life is the curse of want, and we know that the throne is called the throne of want. In the final cutscene, the Emerald Warden narrates to you, regardless of whether or not you've killed her previously, which I thought was funny. You who link the fire, you who bear the curse. Once the fire is linked, souls will flourish anew, and all of this will play out again. It is your choice to embrace or renounce this. Great Sovereign, take your throne. What lies ahead? Only you can see. And as she tells you what lies ahead, only you can see, the stone doors close in on you, and you're trapped in a tiny throne room sitting atop the throne. This was really striking to me, and I think it has major significance. Even though she tells you, you who link the fire, and once the fire is linked, you don't actually link a fire in the cutscene, and there's no visible fire anywhere in the room. Even if you believe the Throne of Want to be roughly the same location as the Kiln of the First Flame, which I do, you don't see the first flame anywhere, and you don't actually link a fire in the cutscene. All you do is sit atop the first throne, and the stone doors lock you in and shut you inside. Well, the Giant's Kinship tells us, each king has his rightful throne, and when he sits upon it, he sees what he chooses to see. Or perhaps it is the throne, which shows the king only what he wants. I think this is alluding to the power and the nature of the monarch sitting atop the throne. Just before fighting Nishandra, Shalquar the cat tells you, Honorable Sovereign, take your throne, and do great things, if it please. What great things can you do on the throne if you're locked in the tiny throne room? Well, we know that it's the Throne of Want, which is sacred, according to the Watcher and Guardian soul descriptions. If the throne shows you what you choose to see, or perhaps only what you want to see, and only you can see what lies ahead, as you're trapped in the tiny throne room, sitting atop it, I believe that the monarch sitting atop the throne in some way shapes reality. You dream Drangleic into existence in some way, which is related to why things betwixt is, quote, an interdimensional rift, according to the guide, between Drangleic and the outer world. Perhaps this is why, even though the Giant Lord Soul says, Soul of the Giant Lord, who once conquered Drangleic, Chancellor Welliger tells you a totally different version of history. If you speak to the ghost of Chancellor Welliger, he just tells you that King Vindric conquered the giants and used their strength to create the golems. He never tells you that any Giant Lord once conquered Drangleic and laid siege to King Vindric's castle. Perhaps this is because Vindric retroactively changed history by sitting atop the Throne of Want. Did he shape it according to what he wanted to see? This might all sound like a stretch, but those stone doors closing in on you, as she says, what lies ahead, only you can see. I really don't think that was a coincidence. Then we get into what is Nishandra's motivation? Because we know that Nishandra is fragments of Manus' soul, which split upon his death. When you fight the Throne Watcher and Throne Defender, they're watching and defending the throne. But for who? Well, the souls of both those bosses say, the throne of the king is sacred and must be observed closely at all times. And the throne of the king is sacred and requires an appropriate guardian. That was the Watcher and then the Defender. Well, if you read the gear description, which you can buy from Malin after defeating the boss, it says, the Throne Watcher has watched over the throne for ages. Will all his waiting ever be rewarded? They've watched over the throne for ages, clearly waiting for something to happen. They're watching and defending it for a specific purpose. They also refer to the throne as sacred. Well, what other things do we know are sacred in the Soul series? We know that the first flame was sacred, and that the lost sinner eternally punishes herself for her greatest of all sins you could possibly commit, which was her trying to relink the flame. So, is the power of the Throne of Want somehow linked to the first flame? Maybe that's why the Kiln of the First Flame and the Throne of Want seem to be in relatively the same spot? Well, the question remains, who are the Throne Watcher and Throne Defender watching over the throne and defending the throne for? I believe it's pretty clear that they're watching and defending the throne for Nishandra, because if you look at the icon of their soul after defeating them, it's dark purple, implying they're corrupted by the abyss. It's just like Artorias' soul. It's not the bright yellow-white color that most of the boss souls are. So if they're watching and defending the throne for Nashandra, and if they wonder if all this waiting will ever be rewarded, what is Nashandra's goal? Well, when you first meet Nashandra, or rather, more likely, the illusion of Nashandra as a pretty little white girl, she tells you, rather cryptically, to go on and meet the king and to become the monarch. But then later, when you fight her true form as the final boss, she tells you in her boss cutscene, "Undead, you have proven yourself to me. Now, be one with the dark." So, if she needed you to become powerful enough to become the monarch, but then only to just want to kill you at the end of the game, what exactly is her goal? The Emerald Warden warns you before you fight Nashandra that if you go on ahead down the path, Nashandra will try to stop you from linking the fire. So is she trying to kill you only because she thinks that you're made up your mind that you're going to link the fire? Perhaps because you're being manipulated towards that end by the Emerald Warden? This makes some sense because it's clear that Nashandra wouldn't want you to link the fire, seeing as she's basically an embodiment of fragments of the Dark Soul. But why did she need you to become powerful enough to become the monarch, only to want to kill you at the end? She tells you, now, be one with the dark. Is she trying to absorb you? Some people have said that she simply wants you to become the next Dark Lord, but how is she going to accomplish that by killing you? I'm not sure what Nashandra's motivations are, relative to the player character, but I think maybe she wants to absorb you or something. Perhaps we'll see if there's different endings in New Game Plus, since we know that so many things change in New Game Plus in this game. Another interesting thing to me is that the opening cutscene for the game tells you, one day you will stand before its decrepit gate, it meaning Drangleic, without really knowing why. The Emerald Warden says something very similar to you. She tells you that one day you'll have to walk the path of the king in Drangleic Castle if you wish to be the monarch, without really knowing why. I think this is related to the fact that the majority of NPCs that you meet in the game can't seem to recall how they got to Drangleic. At first, I thought this was just them hollowing and not remembering much about themselves, but a lot of the NPCs can remember a great deal about their past, their history, their family in the case of Lucatiel. But as soon as they try to recall why they're in Drangleic, they seem to start losing their minds. I think this is related to how Drangleic is somehow different from the quote outer world, and we know that Things Betwixt is an interdimensional rift between Drangleic and the outer world. I think this also has to do with the nature of the Throne of Want, but I'm not sure yet. So that's my theories about the power of the Throne of Want and Nashandra. Next time, I'd like to talk to you about a little theory I have about the Pursuer and Velika, which perhaps many of you came to the same conclusion playing the game yourself, as well as some tidbits about the other NPCs and the other areas, and how it might be further linked to the first game. So I hope you enjoyed, and if you have any questions or you disagree with my conclusions, or you have theories of your own, I'd love to hear all of those things. So please leave a comment either in the YouTube video or in the Reddit thread linked in the description, or come talk to me about them live on my stream at twitch.tv/kylols. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy this wonderful game.